you had mentioned this before, that a lot of the deities and gods that are mentioned in the other mythologies were actually real, but it was the sons of God that were around at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah. So when the Israelites were wandering around through the wilderness, they encountered these other people groups. They would have believed in a creation myth sort of thing, a flood, and so forth. A lot of these people. And but then Moses, what he wrote down and was later formed into the Pentateuch, it explains these different peoples and their gods and where it comes from. And that's why we have the Tower of Babel story. It explains where these people got their gods from. But that means there's a reality to these gods, you know. Um, they weren't figments of the imagination and stuff.
I think that's a traditional view that I personally held for the longest time, and I think most people do. It's just whenever Moses is referring to these gods or idols from other nations, they'd probably just be like, "Well, they're just false gods that they decide to worship." But actually, well, no, they I guess weren't.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is nuts.
But it's interesting because, like I think it's in Deuteronomy 32. I was passing it when I was opening up my Bible before we started talking. But that passage there, that short piece that talks about like the sons of God being dispersed among the nations, how do people interpret that? How do theologians interpret that? It seems so clear that this huge, I don't know, this huge theology or doctrine or concept isn't talked about more. I mean, this goes in general for what we're talking about right now, from Zedek to the sons of God being dispersed with the Edenic people as they were dispersed and mixed within the other clans of people. Like, I don't understand why this hasn't been talked about more.
Well, in Deuteronomy 32:8, if theologians don't want to believe that the nations were set under angelic authorities at that time, if they don't want to believe that, if they don't want that as part of their theology, they'll insist on following the Masoretic Text. And they'll say what it means is that when God scattered the people at the Tower of Babel, he formed nations on earth out of those people. According to the number of the sons of Israel, what would that mean? I don't know.
I suppose that kind of makes sense.
They would just have a watered down view of it. It's,
Hmm.
you know, I don't know. But a lot of people that have that view, they end up thinking, well, is this when the races began? Or does Spanish and Italian and French go back to here? It's like, no, 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 no.
Yeah, what this view has done is, and this is just an example, it makes certain texts look a lot better and make a lot more sense. Um, Otherwise, you just kind of have to, like you said, water things down and maybe take it allegorically or something. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, well, they'd say according to the number of the sons of Israel, and maybe that's another 70 because in Exodus 1, I believe it says that Joseph went down into Egypt and 70 souls with him. And uh, not Joseph, Jacob. Let me look that verse up. In another video, I said Joseph instead of Jacob once, and it got by me in editing too. I was
no.
like, darn it. I was watching the video on YouTube. I was like, oh man. And I've had a few other goof ups since then. And on the first couple ones, I put a little correction on the screen. But since then, there've been a few, and I was like, well, just let them go. People they know what I mean.
Sure.
It's just a couple laymen talking, so.
You did that on purpose to see if people were still paying attention, to catch them in their
Yeah,
yeah,
that's it.
yeah, to make sure to see if they're paying attention after all.
Oh, here to Exodus 1:5.
And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already.
So here's another 70, and maybe some would connect this number of the sons of Israel to this 70 here and make a 70 connection. Sure,
Sure.
So the 70 theme exists, but I've not seen a really good explanation of it. Not even Bollinger really gives a satisfying reason to why we find this pattern. It's something I don't know the answer to myself yet.